As we get closer to a huge week at the Supreme Court for same-sex marriage, a new ad is out today supporting the rights of gays and lesbians to marry.
A growing majority of Americans have come to believe it's time to allow marriage for gay and lesbian couples. Here's why.
Our daughter, Emma.
A gay couple in my ministry.
My sister-in-law. My brother, Octavia.
A business partner.
Our mom.
Supreme Court justices will hear arguments in the battle over Prop 8. That's California's same-sex marriage ban. They'll hear it Tuesday. The next day, the justices will take up the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, which defines marriage as between a man and a woman. And there are reports of people already lining up outside the court to hear these arguments. And joining me now is Adam Umhoefer, the executive director for the American Foundation for Equal Rights. It is a group that originally took on Prop 8. Adam, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Alex.
So I want to get a preview of the case that you're going to present to the Supreme Court next week. What do you have?
Sure. On Tuesday, Ted and David are going to go in that courtroom, and they're going to make the case that, 1, 14 times the Supreme Court is a fundamental right to marry for all Americans. 2, that denying gay and lesbian couples that right hurts them and hurts their families. And 3, that allowing gay and lesbian couples access to this right to make that pledge of public love and commitment to each other through marriage hurts no one else.
You know, and you must be somewhat buoyed by the fact that a group of pediatricians, a nationwide group, agreed that children who are raised with gay parents that are married offer a much more stable home life for them. So that's another thing you can add to your point 4. But when it comes to whether or not this should be a state versus federal issue, we are seeing governors across the country approach it quite differently. You have Colorado's Governor Hickenlooper, who just signed a measure legalizing the civil unions. But then you have in Ohio, Governor John Kasich, who announced his support for the civil unions on Wednesday. Then a day later, his office says, he didn't really mean it. So if the High Court declares Prop 8 unconstitutional, what does that mean for other states that are right now debating this issue?
We have made the case, the broad case for marriage equality, because we think it's the right thing for the court to do. California's Proposition 8 hurts couples like our plaintiffs, Chris and Sandy and Paul and Jeff, but they're really just an example of millions of other Americans across this country in many other states that are also being harmed by discriminatory bans on marriage like Proposition 8.
You know, this month, just a parade of high-profile people and organizations have come out supporting the same-sex marriage. But the Heritage Foundation released a report last week, Adam, that said there is no ban on same-sex marriage. What is at issue is whether the government will recognize such relationships as marriages and enforce every citizen, house of worship, and business to do so as well. Americans have the freedom to live as they choose, but they do not have the right to redefine marriage for everyone else. So is this for same-sex marriage, is this recognition strong enough to overcome that kind of opposition?
I think that absolutely it is. And we're seeing every single day more and more Americans and prominent Americans vocalizing their support for this issue. This week, ABC News put out a poll that showed 58% of Americans supporting the idea of marriage for gay and lesbian couples. And perhaps even more interestingly, 81% of Americans under the age of 30 support the idea of the freedom to marry for gay and lesbian Americans. So I think it's an issue whose time has come, and I think the country is ready for it.
All right. Adam Umhoefer, the executive director of the American Foundation for Equal Rights, thank you so much. We'll be watching along next week.